Although I am involved with CADAC, the Center of ADHD Awareness Canada, the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the participants and do not reflect those of CADAC. And now, cue the music.
This is the Impulsive Thinker Podcast, a show for high-achieving ADHD entrepreneurs. Together, we will inform and educate you about how to improve your self-awareness while developing systems, routines, and habits for conquering the entrepreneurial world. Here is your host, André Brisson.
Hey there, it's André here with another short for the Impulsive Thinker Podcast, the podcast for the high-achieving ADHD entrepreneur. This episode is brought to you by CADAC, the Center of ADHD Awareness Canada. You can get more information and you can donate at www.caddac.ca. Last year, I don't know, sometime a month or so before Christmas, I decided to sell my stamp collection. And yes, by stamp collection, I do mean postage stamps, the little pieces of paper with perforations around it. I started collecting postage stamps when I was 10 years old in grade 5. It's because I had a friend who moved to New Zealand and we were pen pals in the old days of writing envelopes, write on paper and put in an envelope and stamp and mailing across the world. And I liked the stamps. And I kept them, kept it together. I ripped the pages of paper, I ripped around the stamp, kept them, and to the point I had quite a bit. And then my dad actually brought me to an old stamp collector, and I got into stamps a little more. We got an album, and he showed me the catalog, and I got into it. And with my Fact Finder Learner, I really delved into it because every stamp, there's a reason for a stamp. There's a story behind every stamp, and I actually figured out why and learned why. And I got to see a lot of different things about the world and different things about the different countries, which is very interesting. So I did that quite heavily when I was a kid in high school, and I amassed quite a bit. For the amount of money I had, I spent a lot of time getting mint and new stamps and learning lots about it. Then I stopped when I went to university. I got my degree. Then I went and started my engineering career, and I didn't reopen the stamps until about 10 years after I started university. Then I started buying collections and sorting through them. I enjoyed the sorting through and see what was good or not. And I was doing some eBay selling and buying, and started to go to stamp shows and start talking to people in the same industry, the same interests and all that. And it was okay. I thought it was okay. I didn't feel I completely fit in, but I didn't feel like an outcast. Then we moved to a new house. Then I pulled them out again after being at that house for a couple of years because I kept seeing the boxes there. Pulled them out. But then I started to catalog them, and I just started buying stamps. And I would change, and then I changed the albums. And then I started going to stamp shows. I started going with my girls. They liked it, but it was actually liked hanging out with me at these events. But they did not actively look into or actively like or longing to get into stamps, to look into stamps. So I'd have to prod it. And then I made a big cataloging push, and then it stopped. Then we moved again to a new house. And I tried to get back into it again. Started doing more shows with the kids, but it was becoming almost robotic. Cataloging the stamps was a pain. I always kept pulling them out, see what am I going to do, and think about what I'm going to do with the collections and all that. And it became a bore almost. And, over COVID, I ended up just staring at that collection that was on the bookshelf, and I kept buying. And the kids really had no interest in it, and I had no interest in it, but it was a constant distraction and almost to the point of feeling guilty not getting into it. So I sold them. Now, I seriously thought about it and really processed a bunch of stuff, but I sold them. Some guy came in, he gave me a fair price. I just took it, and it's gone. He took it all that same day, and it's gone. And I have no remorse over it. But the reason I sold the stamps was because I came to a realization that stamp collecting was a habit, and I had to keep it, and I had to try to keep it current because it was a habit. I had very little interest. It was robotic. It's just something I kept doing. I kept buying the annual books. I kept buying the quarterly supplements. I kept buying more stuff, just buying, amassing, but I wasn't doing anything with it. I had a lot of plans, but I was not initiating on any of those plans. Why? Because I was no longer interested. And why was I not interested? And why did I keep those stamps in the collection and kept spending money? And it's what I knew it was a little more than a habit. I just remember my wife a long time ago, like I refereed ringettes, an on-ice sport for women, hockey skates and all that. And I refereed that for 25 years. And I was really miserable the last 5. I was highly ranked. And I was an instructor. I was an evaluator. And I said, why am I not liking this stuff? And I keep forcing myself to go. And she just looked at me and says, because it's a habit. You're used to. It's 20 years. Every weekend you're going out on a tournament. It's a habit. You're just doing it because you've done it before and not put much thought into it. And that's what I did here. I was no longer interested. Why keep it? What I realized was my stamp collection was actually a safe haven for when I was a kid. As I was in my stamps, researching, going through my stamps, soaking stamps, drying them, peeling them off, cataloging them, putting them in the albums, I was separated from all the drama at home. I was separated. I didn't have to deal with it. And it was justified that I was alone in my room doing stamps versus just not being there for no known reason. So it gave me justification to stay out. So it was a safe haven. It was an escape. It was a release. And I think that's why I held on to the stamps for so long, because emotionally, those stamps were there to protect me. And it was a way for me to separate myself from the drama, from all the BS, where I didn't have to deal with it and have my self-confidence and my emotional resiliency being tattered or bombarded. And I think what it was is keeping those stamps near me was a safe haven. It was a comfort. It was a habitual comfort on having it. And I always talked myself out of it. I made that realization. Now I'm starting to look at other things that I'm holding on that I know I don't have any interest in. Maybe it's a hoarding kind of mentality. I don't know. I don't know if I could. I don't think that was a fair statement, but I'm starting to look at a bunch of things and say, do I really need it? And if I don't have an interest, I'm starting to see what emotional attachment I have to it. Because my youngest daughter, she will not get rid of a lot of her stuffies because that kid knows exactly who gave her the stuffy, under what situation it was received or found, and probably what her emotional state of mind was at that time. And she almost bonds with those, and she will not give it away because of those emotional bonds and relations to it. And I think there's a lot of it here. When I sold my stamp collection, I got a release. I don't need to have this lug. It was almost like an anchor. Every time I went to my office, it was there. You're supposed to do something. You're supposed to do something. But why was I holding on? And I realized that it was a safe haven for me as a kid. It was one of the few comforts that I have of sanity and validation, that I was good at things. And I had to keep it close. And I'm still trying to figure out why I had to keep it close. But right now, I sold my stamp collection. I have no remorse. I understand what it is, and I was able to separate the two. I no longer need the stamp collection to be my safe haven because I've created my own separately in a different way and finding different ways for self-care. So I guess in a way that safe haven was one of my minimal attempts at self-care when I was a kid. I don't know if this makes sense to you. I'm wondering is there anything that you're holding on to that you're attached to? And I'm challenging you, if maybe there's an emotional attachment that is related to a safe haven or to a certain pleasant memory, but if you feel guilt or it's a distraction because you can't get to it, what's holding on to it? For me, identifying was the safe haven. I no longer need it. It was easy for me to just make that decision and go. Of course, I got the person to come as quickly as possible, so I didn't change my mind. But again, it's been about 3 months since the stamps have been gone. I don't miss it. I actually feel lighter and not bogged down, and I can work on other things at home. Let me know what you think about this. Send me an email at andre@andreb.ca. It'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Impulsive Thinker podcast. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion for the show, please visit theimpulsivethinker.com. The Impulsive Thinker podcast is produced by Tactical Breakthroughs and hosted by André Brisson. Remember, ADHD is only a part of you, not all of you.